Basic psychology. Localization of function in the brain. Visual centers and auditory centers. Did you know that the brain has two visual cortices, one in each hemisphere?
No, I didn't know that. Can you tell me more about the visual centers in the brain?
Absolutely. The primary visual cortex is located in the occipital lobe at the back of the brain. It's thought to be the main visual center, and individuals with damage to this area report no vision.
Fascinating. How does visual processing work in the brain?
Visual processing begins in the retina at the back of the eye, where light strikes the photoreceptors. The nerve impulses then travel through the optic nerve to the brain.
I see. And where do these impulses go from there?
Most of the impulses terminate at the thalamus, which acts as a relay station and passes the information to the visual cortex in both hemispheres.
Wow, that's really interesting. What about the auditory centers in the brain?
The auditory cortex is located mostly in the temporal lobes, one in each hemisphere. Sound waves are converted into nerve impulses in the cochlea of the inner ear and then travel to the auditory cortex.
I didn't realize the brain had such complex systems for processing sensory information. This is really fascinating.
Absolutely. Understanding the brain's visual and auditory centers is crucial for studying human perception and cognition. Motor cortex and somatosensory cortex. The motor cortex is responsible for conscious, voluntary movements. It sends messages to the muscles via the brainstem and spinal cord.
That's really interesting. So, the motor cortex controls the movements on the opposite side of the body?
Exactly. The motor cortex in the right hemisphere controls the movements of the left side of the body, and vice versa.
Wow, I didn't realize the brain worked that way. What about the somatosensory cortex?
The somatosensory cortex is located in the parietal lobe, alongside the postcentral gyrus. It's responsible for processing touch-based sensations and experiences.
So, the somatosensory cortex also has a contralateral relationship with the body?
Yes, that's right. The somatosensory cortex in each hemisphere receives information from the opposing side of the body. Broca's area and Wernicke's area. One of the most well-known language regions is called Broca's area. It's located in the frontal lobe of the dominant hemisphere, usually the left side.
And what does Broca's area do?
Broca's area is primarily responsible for speech and language production. Studies have shown that damage to this area can make it difficult for people to use certain parts of speech, like prepositions and conjunctions.
Wow, that's fascinating. What about the other language region, Wernicke's area?
Wernicke's area is located in the temporal lobe and is believed to be involved in understanding language. Patients with damage to this area can still speak, but they struggle to comprehend what they're hearing. Evaluating localization of function. The holistic theory of brain function suggests that memory, for example, is not stored in specific areas, but is distributed throughout the brain.
Wow, that's interesting. What evidence supports that idea?
Lashley, 1950, conducted animal studies on rats and found that there was no specific area involved in memory, but rather it was stored all over the brain.
That's quite different from the localization of function theory. What do other studies say?
Other research does suggest that localization of function is valid, as we see specific deficits in people with brain damage, like loss of speech.
That makes sense. But if function is localized, how do people recover from brain damage?
That's a good point. Some research has shown brain plasticity, where other parts of the brain can compensate for the damaged area, like in the case of the Italian boy, E.B.
Fascinating. So, it seems like the debate is still ongoing, with evidence on both sides.
Exactly. The communication between different brain areas may also be more important than strict localization of function.